and I want to talk about theories about the Bible that everybody might not know about. And Dion, I want to start with you because we were talking before we went live about this whole Adam and Eve thing. What's going on with Adam and Eve? And I'm just going to throw it over to you. Let's start fresh with this approach without any biases at all. Like, what could this story mean of Adam and Eve being split from ribs and all this stuff? What is this all about?
Oh, it's going back to the rib. That's how we start. It's the rib. That's what always threw me at the beginning of the story. You know, God creates heavens and space and time, and everything's chill up to that point. And then creates a man, and then from there, the woman is created from the rib. That part confuses me.
Right.
Because you don't learn that at regular school. When you go to I went to school to study, I wanted to be a nurse. And they definitely don't teach you that part. What happened to the woman being equal to the man at the beginning of the story? You know, if you look back at different mythologies, there's a male and a female. But here, the woman has to be put down into position that she's only just a man's body part.
Right. Yeah. So this is kind of the theory that we're getting at here, is that there's this pervasive idea that the feminine is removed and kind of suppressed throughout the Bible. And it begins right with this creation story, right? And this is kind of the prime example, because when we're looking at a lot of these traditions in the area that are going on, we have these divine kind of hermaphrodites that are at the beginning of time, you know, these bi-gendered God figures that are then split apart, usually to become creation. Like, I think of the Greco-Roman Fanes as sort of a prime example of this, right? And it's very clear that Fanes is a bi-gendered figure, and that when they're split apart into these equal parts, right? And then there's also this idea that the original person in the Greek, like the original people, are these dual figures that have two heads that are both male and female, that then Zeus splits apart because they're too strong, right? And they can't exist as this bi-gendered form because they'll be able to threaten the gods. So there's what we're trying to highlight here is like the reason why these kind of theories are pervasive is because there's this culture in the area, in and around within these other pagan traditions of these kind of like bi-gendered beginnings, you know, where there's this equal between the male and the female.
Yeah, when you look at Phanes, you're right. There's a serpent present. You almost gotta wonder, is this story that we see, first of all, we see the story going back to the Sumerians with Ninhursag and Enkidu, and they take it's basically the same story where they take the man and they pull something out of his backside and create the woman out of it.
But you said backside.
Yes.
That's very important.
Now, tell people why that is.
How are they attached? Is it just a little body part that you pull from the body? Like the story of the leg, where they create a hero off of the leg. Is that Zeus and Dionysus?
Yes.
You know,
Dionysus comes out. Yeah.
No, the leg.
A male giving birth to the male. There's no. You don't need we don't need a mother here. It's the patriarchal succession thing happening. It's kind of interesting how that is.
It has to detach. It's almost like it's grown onto the body. You know, it's not a natural birth. And from the backside, it would seem that they're attached. It's two beings. And so if it's from the backside, then they're detaching something that's two. You know, and it's just a body part, and we're just pulling a little body part out.
And it's reflective again of that prime person, right, that we see within the Greek myths, right? The original person is split in two. They exist, you know, attached at the backside. So, like, it's not a big stretch here, but it's interesting, right? Like, what is going on within this Jewish tradition? Because that's not the only instance of women being suppressed and being kind of removed, right? Because there's this whole figure of Asherah, right? And this one is a lot more mainstream because like a lot of scholars are now starting to recognize and come forward and talk about how Asherah played a much more central role within Judaism in the earlier years and then is systematically erased from the pantheon. And like Dion, you have a whole thing about this, about the divine family. Do you want to talk about that?
Let's do it. I love it, because I was just going to say, when you look at these ancient, I don't know, maybe I'd say Bronze Age, post-Bronze Age, somewhere in that like sweet spot, 900s BCE, 800, 700 BCE. When you look at all these city-states that are all over the Mediterranean, they have different mythologies. They're all different. It's not all uniform yet. That's a later Roman thing. But they all have these things in common, where it's like you have a father king and a divine mother, and then the divine child, and there's all these different gods that play different roles. They're all mostly polytheistic. Very, very few have just one god. But yeah, tell us about this. What's going on with that?
Yeah, Isis and Osiris, they're a couple. But at a certain point, God doesn't want a girlfriend. That's what happens. And how do you reconcile that into the story? So, well, somebody has to give birth from a rib, and then where does Cain get his wife from? We have a problem at the beginning of the story with women.
Why is that? I honestly have no idea why that is. I'm wondering. Actually, I do have an idea why that is. When war becomes the main part of culture, when it's all about who can conquer the next city, war. Think about what war is about. Male. You need men to join the armies. Women don't join the armies. Very few do. There are some. But like for the most part, in the ancient world, men would join the armies and men would raid the countries. And so like the gods that you want to, like, it's all about when it comes to anything in media, art, film, music, it's all about representation. And like you look up to the figures, the heroes in these stories, and you try to imitate them. So you would think, evolution-wise, the countries or the civilizations, the nations that win are the ones that are following their gods, following their heroes. And then in these cases, you have these divine heroes who are like Achilles or, some god that conquers, like Yahweh or something. And so those are the cultures that follow. They're imitating the gods and vice versa. Yep. And then the gods reflect the people.
So we call that Temple of Mars. The Temple of Mars? The
Romans are all about Mars.
Yeah. We think behind the scenes in modern times, your Hollywood entertainment complex and all the shit that's going on, that's Temple of Mars. That's your alpha cult. That's the one that takes over the other cults.
And that's funny that you said that, because like when we look at the Romans, they're a warrior culture. Their main gods are Mars, Jupiter, and Romulus. They have a triad, they call it, a Capitoline triad. And you see that the great heroes, the historical heroes, are trying to be like Romulus. They're imitating Romulus. They want to be like Romulus. But like Mars is their main god also, and he's the warrior god. So what happens? Rome becomes a warrior culture.